discipline is like electricity. So you can have the best equipment in your house, like TV, refrigerator, PC, but without electricity, nothing of that will work. And the same is, I think, with discipline. So you can have the best ideas, the best resources, the best books. You can buy yourself the best like training equipment or anything, but without discipline, all just will not work.
Hi, and welcome. It's Runchuks, and you're listening to my podcast where I explore the topics around what it takes to become a great poker player with various interesting people from in and around the poker industry. If you're enjoying the podcast, you might be interested to sign up to my weekly newsletter where I deliver my key takeaways and ideas from each latest episode. Today, I'm talking to Leszek Badurowicz, the author of The Mental Edge, who's also a PLO player and overall a very nice guy. We talk about the importance of discipline, routines, goal setting, different approaches to studying poker, maintaining your motivation, and so much more. Enjoy! All right, Leszek, listen, I have so many things actually to ask you because I went through, the contents of your book, the index of your book. So many great topics. So it's going to be a wealth of information here. How about we start, before we dive into your book, how about we start with you? And maybe you can tell us a bit about what's going on now and maybe your journey so far.
Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Leszek Badurowicz, and thanks for the invitation to the podcast. I'm from Poland. I'm 35 years old, and I've been playing poker for about 10 years now. However, I have never been playing like exclusively only poker. I was always combining being a player with being a teacher, being mental game trainer, mental game coach. And that's why in the past I have been working with basically every poker site available in Poland. I've recorded, I think, like 300, maybe more mental game videos or podcasts. And I'm still working with Runchuks as a coach. And at some point, I think it was late 2016, I decided to gather most of my experience and put it into book, The Mental Edge. And right now, I'm at the moment that I decided to focus more on the poker career. So since last year, I'm not taking like any more people for individual coachings or anything. I decided to focus my efforts, my time, and my energy to see how much I can achieve in poker. So I'm playing pot limit Omaha. I'm playing anything from Zoom 500 up to PLO 10K if there's a good table.
All right. Why did you decide to concentrate just on poker?
At some point I think I was quite good at poker, but definitely far from being very good or excellent. I was at similar level, I think, when it comes to like mental game stuff. So I realized that in order to be really successful, to really excel at one of those fields, I have to make a choice and I have to decide to focus all my time, all my resources just on one field. Because at some point, it's basically impossible to combine poker career with coaching career, like at very high level. And I decided that it would be easier to go with poker career first, because if I would go with a mental game coach career first, then it will be very hard to come back to poker because the game is developing so fast, the level of players is increasing, that after 10 years, let's say, there's no way to be back to the game. Whereas even after some time, I can still go back to the coaching because psychology doesn't change so drastically and so dynamically as poker. And also, I think even people who are a bit older with more life experience and work experience can be even like better coaches.
Right, especially in the mental game aspect, because
Yes.
I mean, considering that you went through 10 years of career, you've learned so many things, you've experienced so many things in your own career that you talk in your book, you talk from your experience, of course, also a lot of theory, but this theory is tested out on yourself.
Yeah, and I think there's one more thing that I may add is that at the very beginning of my poker career, I started from very low, let's call this mental game level. So I was tilting a lot. I even had this episode of like a very dramatic tilt where I like lost half of my bankroll, was, shouting, was very angry and so on. And because of that, I had a very long journey to come from like very low mental game level to the level that I perceive as pretty high. It really cost me a lot of like energy, effort, a lot of coachings that I was taking myself, a lot of professional training, studies, books, and so on. And because of that, I can really very well like feel some players who struggle with tough mental game issues because I struggled with most of them myself in the past. I'm not the guy who was like, already like at the very like super rational, very with very cold, head, not feeling, much emotions. No, I was starting with completely different level, and I'm quite proud that I managed to get to the point where it's like almost impossible for me to tilt, or it's like super rare and like not really affecting the game that much.
Right. I'm actually interested in the story, the story that you've mentioned of you losing half of your bankroll. What period are we talking about? Did it happen in a few days' time, or how did it go?
It was 2010, and actually the story should start a bit earlier, because at my university I was really interested in trading. So I went for some professional trading courses, and I started trading at a Forex market. And actually it appeared that the courses that I finished were really good. So they were providing with the strategy that at that period of the markets was very successful. However, I lost like 80% of my bankroll, and after 1 year, I decided to quit trading. And the reason was that I was losing with myself, with the emotions. I didn't manage to stick to the strategy, and the real emotions that came when it comes to the real market were like too overwhelming. For example, the guy who was teaching us the strategy said something like, you should be making about 2 trades per week. So it gives about, let's say, 100 trades per year. And after 1 year, I checked my account and I made about 1,000 trades. So it's 10 times more than I should. So it's very clear that I didn't stick to the correct strategy. Later on, I tried poker. At the very beginning, I had some, small successes. I won some small tournaments. I started winning with my friends in some local home games, and I started playing online. And at some point, I remember that I had a streak of 18 winning sessions in a row, and that was 2010. So that was 10 years ago. And it was 19 session that I finished like minus $1, and that was PL of 50. So it's like, it's nothing. It's 2 big blinds. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I thought, no, I cannot finish the session with minus $1. I'm so attached to this, thought of having every session ended like with a profit, that I need to continue until I will turn the profit. And I didn't turn the profit. I was playing till 4 a.m, and I had to wake up at 7 to work. I lost like 1/3 of my bankroll. And then when I came back from work, I lost like another 20% or something. So in total, it was like I lost half of my bankroll within less than 24 hours. And that was very painful experience, and experience that taught me a lot. And after that, I said, okay, it's enough. I stop. It's either I take it serious, or I will not succeed in poker or trading, because it doesn't matter what kind of field I will start to be learning. I will not succeed if I will not be able to control my emotions and be disciplined. So at that time, I decided to focus a lot of my attention on learning how to manage my emotions, a lot of psychological trainings, and so on. And that brought me to the place where I am today.
Wow, what a story. I mean, I can only imagine 18 winning sessions, you lose $1, and you basically monkey it off in a course of one day. It's crazy. And the truth is, it's not a unique story. I mean, probably the majority of poker players had an experience like this at some point, in a harder or a lesser, form. But yeah, because I recently recorded a video which is called Moving Up the Stakes. And in fact, it is telling like a fictional story along the same lines, that you've experienced. And it's probably a testament to your approach and mentality that experience pushed you to make a decision. Okay, I'm not doing it right. I must, improve. I must work on my game, because if I don't, I will never achieve anything. It's a great way to look at it. I think so many people, after losing half of their bankroll, they probably lose, another half, so 25% more in the next day, because of ego, because of all other things, So it's good to hear that experience was a trigger for you to become more professional in your approach.
Yeah, sometimes this kind of like bad experience, you can turn it into something good if you draw proper conclusions from that and put effort, put your hard work into changing that into positive experience.
Right. Did you have, after this experience, after losing half of your bankroll in one day, did you have other episodes like this? I suppose not losing half of it, but like going on a monkey tilt still after that, because I don't believe that anybody can just, switch immediately from day one to day two, right? So maybe tell me a bit about how this progress happened.
So let's call this that in a scale from 1 to 10, that was tilt. Let's call this 9.5 or 10. Okay.
Right.
I remain some the rest of self-control, but it was basically, let's say, 9.5. So it never happened 9.5 again, but let's say half year later, it happened like 8. Then let's say half year later, 7. So I had some episodes of some more serious tilt later on, especially like 1-2 years later on, but it was always like one level lower. And I think, let's say 3-4 years later, it went to level like 2 or 3 and never crossed that boundary again. And right now, I think, I don't know, I haven't crossed like 1.5 for let's say last 2 or 3 years for sure.
Right. And I think it's so important that we mention this, right? Because I believe, in general in our society nowadays, so many people are looking for like the top 3 tips to do whatever, top 3 tips to get rid of tilt forever. The reality is it took you several years to reach a level where you're consistently good at managing your emotions. And it's not only about, like, from my own experience, right? And maybe your experience is different, but I think you probably have the same road in a way that it's not just one thing. It's the combination of all the things, being process oriented, being consistent with your approach, how professionally you approach the game, how you manage your time, how you manage your bankroll. Because if all the checkboxes are ticked, the emotions don't really get there, right? You don't play a spontaneous session where you're just like, oh, I'm kind of bored, I'm going to play a bit and then see what happens. You always have a process in place, and that process helps you with managing whatever happens.
Yes, I totally agree. A lot of especially micro stakes, small stakes players, they are looking for this like golden rule, one of the key tip, and there's like the most important tip is that there is no tip, that there is just there is a series of steps that you need to do. There are a couple of different competences, skills that you need to gain, and there's a lot of work that you need to put if you are starting from pretty low level in order to work on your mental game and start controlling your emotions in a proper way. So I definitely agree that there's no like one tip, and you need to combine a lot of different areas.
Exactly. And also, like, because from one perspective, there is no tip. From another perspective, there are things that work. Some things work for me, some things don't work for me, and everybody is individual. So there's always some sort of individual approach based on your personality, etc., etc. But there are guiding principles, right? And the reality is there's so much information out there, right? If you're motivated to improve your mental game, man, there's lots of books. Not all of them are strictly poker related, right? But there's a lot of information out there for sports psychology, etc., etc. There are coaches. There's everything is there for you, and yet a lot of people don't take this step because a lot of people don't see that the mental game is hugely important until they lose half of their bankroll, like you did, right? Because before that happens, there's no urgency for it, right? You don't see the direct correlation. So many people just focus on, okay, how do I learn the ranges? How do I memorize the ranges? How do, I start understanding how to play the spot better? How do I work with solvers, etc., etc.? That's all great, but let's face it, if you're going to have 19 winning sessions, 18 winning sessions, everything is going to be just fine. As soon as you hit that one session that puts you in the tilt, I mean, you basically ruined probably more than a month's work in just one day by just going on a monkey tilt.
Yeah, exactly. Looking from perspective, also like gain a really important experience. So I'm really happy that it happened at that specific moment. But I totally agree that a lot of people, they don't put enough stress to the mental game, and this way they are basically leaking money out of their pocket.
And especially, like you said, it's good that it happened at that stage, right? You were playing PLO 50. Imagine if that happens PLO 5K. I mean, and it happens. I mean, some people just run good for a long stretch. They move up the stakes pretty quickly, and they don't develop the good habits along the way, right? Unless they hire a coach that's going to be with them there and guide them through and catch them before they, jump off the cliff accidentally by just doing something stupid. Unless they have these things in place, a lot of people hurt themselves by not being strong enough in their mental game. And I think it was Barry Greenstein who said, show me a poker player who hasn't been broke yet, and I'll show you a poker player who has a lot to learn. Right? And it's true. I mean, again, it comes to not having the urgency, not having the need to recognize that, hey, there's more to this. It's really, really, really important.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So, okay. Anyway, so you improved your own mental game. You worked on it purposefully. And then you decided to coach other people. How did this transition happen? How did you think, I would like to share my experience with others and I would like to make videos on the subject?
I think it was because I started writing about mental game on poker forum. At that time, it was Poker Strategy, like Polish branch. And even though I still haven't fixed a lot of mental game leaks at that point, probably there was nobody who was more competent than me. So they offered me a job to be a mental game coach. And I would say that at the very beginning, I probably didn't have enough very, let's call this sophisticated knowledge. I didn't have so many very powerful techniques in my arsenal. It was more about just approach, game philosophy, and sharing my experience and my ideas, on solving some mental game issues. But with time, I was participating in more and more psychological trainings. I started sports psychology studies, and I kept improving. And I think that my insight about the mental game, my knowledge started becoming better and better. So at some point, I felt more competent to start working with other sides, start working with people, and so on and so on.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And how this idea of writing a book, how did that come about? You mentioned in the beginning that basically you had a lot of material already that you developed for the videos and for your coaching sessions, but still undertaking a task like writing and publishing a book, that's a big thing. How did that happen?
Especially in 2014-16, I put a lot of stress to the mental game. At that time, I finished sports psychology studies, and I worked with a couple of different sites and companies. I started being Runchuks coach. And at that point, I gathered really a lot of powerful techniques that I believe haven't been mentioned in any other poker books. So I tried to read everything that was out there. And my idea was that I don't want to repeat anything that has been already written. There's no point in doing that. But I realized that, for example, The Poker Mindset is a very good book about the basic poker philosophy, about building the right approach to game philosophy. Then there was Mental Game of Poker, which is a very good book in terms of finding your reasons, why are you tilting, understanding the tilt better, and how to deal with tilt better. But I realized that there is no book about how to be more organized, more disciplined, more professional. I remember that Dusty Schmidt, Lederas, tried to write something like this many years ago, Treat Your Poker Like a Business, but that was super basic level. And that was basically a couple of his ideas on the topic. But nobody really gathered all main psychological techniques, tools, or the result of the most important psychological research in terms of organization, planning, and discipline, and put it into poker perspective with application in the poker world. So I decided that I can be a person who can do that. And I've been writing a book for 3 months, and then there was one month of some, let's say, small corrections and something. So it took me about 4 months, and I was barely doing anything else at that time. So it was the time that I spent almost entirely on the book.
All right. And did you have people helping you, some because usually in the process of writing a book, as far as I know, I mean, I haven't written a book yet, at least, but you would have like an editor, a publisher kind of person who would guide you in a way like you should include this, you shouldn't include this, you should edit this. Was there such a person, or you basically came up with this book completely on your own?
It depends in which aspect of the book we are talking about. In terms of content, when the book was half written, I sent it to a couple of poker players for feedback. And actually, I received already very good feedback, but also kind of few tips and guidelines on things that can be improved, which really helped me in the process of writing and editing the book. And whenever I was in doubt, I had contact to quite a few professors of psychology, and I was like consulting them in a few aspects where I wasn't really sure about something because, for example, there are contradictory psychological research and you cannot be 100% sure if it's this way or another. And also, when it comes to publishing and editing, there was a guy, like, let's say, he used to be a poker player and he was like a now businessman. And we talked that we can publish the book together and he will take care about the printing, editing, finding people who will, edit that, make a, book cover and everything. And so that I don't have to waste my time and energy on that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right. But let's talk about the book, right? It's 6 big sections, right? You have time management, goal setting, discipline and habits, mindset, professional approach, and working on your game, right? These are the 6 pillars that you chose for your book. Let's discuss some of these things because these are the things that I usually talk about as well, and I work on those things a lot with my students, and it's so important. These topics are so important. You wrote the book in 2016, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the transition now? Like right now, this is 2020 already. 4 years have passed. How many of the ideas that you've expressed have crystallized even more? How many ideas have evolved? Maybe let's talk about that first.
Mm-hmm. It reminded me a quote that I heard about students of medicine, that on the first day they hear something like, within next 10 years, half of the things that you will learn during the university will no longer be valid. There will be like new data coming. Right. But the problem is that we don't know which half, so we have to learn everything. And fortunately, with psychology is less complicated, and there are like fewer new things coming on. I think all the first 5 chapters would stay exactly the same. I'll make some very small, maybe improvements to some sections, but let's say over 90% of first 5 chapters would stay the same. Since 2016, I've been working with a couple of high stakes guys, so now I have much more insight when it comes to working on your game. So maybe I would change a bit the last section about working on your game. Still, the ideas that are included there are valuable. However, I think that now with new tools like PO and Monker Solver, there is a need to even expand on that topic and include some tools that will help people to work better with those programs.
Mm-hmm. I want to actually talk a bit about, and we're going to get back into discussing some of the topics in more detail, right? I think it's really worth doing that. But let's first take like a big picture view on, you worked with some of the high stakes players out there, and you worked with people who are kind of starting out in poker, or at least are in the beginning of their career. What is the biggest difference that you see?
It might be surprising for you, and I think for a lot of listeners, but from my perspective, very often working with high stakes players, it's much, much easier than working with micro or low stakes players. Sometimes I'm even like, it's so common like in poker world, but I think in any other like field that you got like references from like the most well-known guy, the highest stakes players, but in reality it's not that difficult to work with them. It's much harder to work with low stakes players, and this is because each problem you can basically solve on two levels: practical one and psychological ones. So let's say we are talking about somebody who wants to improve their volume. So on a practical level, you can say, okay, for example, you can set some fixed hours. So let's say you're always playing between 5 to 10. Okay. You can let know your friends and your family that you are playing with these hours, and you can make only one exceptions every 2 weeks. Okay. And these are, practical advices that for like high stakes players will be, okay, I'm applying this and the topic is over. But if you will be working with low stakes players, micro stakes players, I can guarantee you 100% that it will not work. And this is not because they don't want to, or they're less intelligent, or that they can be at the same level of like, intelligence, and they can be even, very often they can be even smarter people in many ways than high stakes players. But there's something, else. Very often people who get to the high stakes level, they are already, their mindset is, let's say, in a very good condition in their overall mental game in terms of like life effectiveness, productivity. They usually have very few internal conflicts and self-sabotages. And most of the society, so let's say 99% of the society, will have much more internal conflicts, self-sabotages, and so on. So what happens with like low stakes players, micro stakes players, is actually what happens with most of the society. So they not only do they need like practical tips, but they also need psychological solutions to their problems. So on psychological level, maybe they are not playing volume because of some other reasons. And I can give you a couple of examples of players I worked with exactly on this issue. So for example, there was one player, heads-up player, and he actually suffered, with putting a lot of volume. And we talked about setting fixed hours and so on, and it didn't work because he perceived any sort of plans, any sort of discipline as a limitation to his freedom. So we had to work on the way how he perceives his freedom, his limitation, and we had to find a balance in order to set some sort of plan, but not too strict, so that he will not, feel limited, but at the same time he will be doing more than he's doing now, and so on. So this work is much tougher than just, some practical tips. Another example maybe I was also working with a player who really had a huge problems with putting volume. I mean, his volume was very low, and that was very smart, very intelligent, sensitive, very nice guy, very talented player who could be like one of the top in his field. But he was like putting, let's say, 12 hours per week. So that's very little. And the problem was that the game cost for him a lot of stress. And the game cost him a lot of stress because he lacked confidence in the game. And he lacked confidence in the game because he wasn't sure what is the best solution. And you can see that we never know what is the best solution. And for him, it was causing lack of confidence, and lack of confidence was causing stress. So not playing was a way to deal with the stress. So as you can see, if you are working with players who are not, who are having some internal conflicts and self-sabotages, and most of people will have some, then it's much tougher. It's actually much tougher way. And with high stakes players, usually it's just you're working mostly on a practical level.
But I'm not surprised, to be honest. You said that I might be surprised to hear. That is also my experience from working with the high stakes guys and low stakes guys. And I think, the reasons are, like you said, that the high stakes guys already are in a pretty good place in their mental game. So they are looking for solutions. They are looking for practical advice, and having to kind of fix bigger underlying problems is usually not the issue there. Yeah, very interesting topic. I wanna stay with the topic a bit, because if we think about volume, right? Another aspect there, which I see a lot of people are suffering with, and you made this example of this guy who was unsure about his decisions, right? So that caused anxiety, that caused stress. Very often people have this approach of, well, I don't want to say perfectionism, but sort of, that you kind of only start doing something when you're really ready. The reality is you're never ready. Especially when it comes to poker, the game keeps evolving. It's not static. You might spend like half a year preparing for the game and then start playing your first session. Well, I mean, in that half a year, the game already, changed so much. I think the high stakes players in general, at least the people that I worked with, they are more happy to just go out there and know that, okay, I'm making mistakes. I'm not 100% sure about these decisions, etc., but I'm going to do it anyway, right? And I'm going to improve away from the tables. I'm going to work on my game, but I'm not going to wait till this magical moment when I'm all of a sudden a perfect player, because that's never going to come.
Yes, exactly. There are much more players with a problem of perfectionism at mid-stakes level than at high-stakes level. A lot of high-stakes players, they just have a strong belief in themselves that I don't know how to do that, but I will deal with that. And even though I make a mistake, I can learn from this mistake. And next time I can just be better and I can figure out something during the game. Whereas a lot of mid-stakes players who suffer with perfectionism, they have this problem of I need to be perfectly ready. I need to know everything. I need to know all the solutions. And there's a lot of different reasons. I don't want to talk about general level, but very often the problem is that they don't have a well-defined confidence. So when you ask them about what does it mean to be confident for you, they will come with the definition that is basically impossible to put into practice. So let's say they will very often say something like, I feel confident when all my decisions are good or perfect and I always know what I'm doing. That's actually can never happen. So the definition that they have is causing them, the definition will for sure make them suffer. So we need to work on the basic level on changing the idea of confidence and changing their definition of confidence to something that is more healthy and more beneficial for them.
Mm-hmm. Right. If you had to choose, what are the absolutely the foundational things that everybody needs, would you have a list of things that that are absolutely a must work on for people especially for people who are starting out in poker or are sort of stagnating in low stakes environment?
Mm-hmm. I think I would name 3-4 main things, and 3 of them are actually things that I'm talking a lot in the book. So that's this growth mindset, and I'm pretty sure that you're familiar with the concept. And discipline, professionalism, and tilt control. So that would be 4 main ideas. I think everything starts with the growth mindset. There's a great book of Carol Dweck, mindset, if somebody wants to dig deeper into that topic. Once I listened to the podcast of Joe Ingram with this MTT guy, Alex Foxen. I think if somebody wants to a perfect example of somebody who is like 100% growth mindset, just listen to this guy. It's like a perfect example of a guy who is like just wants to learn from mistakes, just want to be getting better. And very often the problem is that people with fixed mindset, and that's also like low mid-stakes, like I would say disease, low mid-stakes illness. And very often the underlying reasons for that is that there were people who were praised of being intelligent when they were in school. So very often their parents will say something like this: you know what? You are very smart because you didn't even study and you got A or you got 5, depending on if you're US or in Europe. What's the message that the real message that the child will get is that I'm only smart if I'm not putting effort and I'm achieving a good result. And actually, this is like pretty something that's pretty common, and a lot of poker players are very intelligent people. So it's very safe to assume that most of us were like the best or one of the best students in our classes in primary school, high school, or at university. And very often we could probably be getting very good marks without much studying, or with less studying than some less talented people. And if somebody will point that out to us, it's actually very bad, because then we learn that without effort we can like go through life and we don't have to like really put this effort. And especially people with like some sport background, and Alex was also a guy who was practicing American football, and he had to like he said something that he had to like wake up very early and putting a lot of effort in the trainings, practicing very hard. So that's something, completely different, and that helps people to have this like growth mindset mentality. I think if somebody wants to like really know how pure growth mindset looks into practice, just listen to this guy. I mean, it's just a great example of growth mindset.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you've mentioned managing your tilt, right, as one of the 4 things that are super important. What do you think? How should people approach it?
So I think getting to Jared Tendler book, Mental Game of Poker, it's like it's like step number 1. It's increasing your awareness, what type of tilt you are suffering, and what are the reasons, what is the like underlying reasons for that tilt. However, awareness, it's not always fixing the issue. You can be aware that you have a bad side, but it doesn't make you have a better side. So then you need to do something with that. And actually, you have 3 types of approaches to working with tilt, which can be work on your game philosophy, preparation, or intervention. And preparation is something that you do before the session. I'm like a huge fan of that. Then intervention is something that you do during the session. Actually, not a big fan of that, because during the session, very often you have a lot of things going on, you have a lot of tables, and you don't have that much time to think about like, breathing exercises or something. I'm not really big fan here. And the game philosophy is like changing your beliefs and your way of thinking about the game to more healthy and to the way that it will not cause tilt. Because if you like believe that, let's say, you cannot get 5 bad beats in a row, it's very short way to start tilting when it happens. However, if you don't have that belief, then it's more healthy. So you can find different kind of situations that are triggering, that are causing the tilt for you. And you can try to go deeper and think what exactly in this situation caused me the tilt. And then you can think what is like underlying game philosophy behind that and try to change it into a more healthy one. It's actually not that easy to do, to find it by yourself if somebody doesn't have a very high self-awareness. I think that books like Poker Mindset or Mental Game of Poker can really help in that aspects, or working with some good mental game coach. I think all of those solutions can be really helpful.
Yeah. And as with any improvement, books and all the material, as you said, if somebody has good self-assessment, it's a perfect thing, right? Getting a coach is usually a more of a shortcut, a proven way of actually achieving the desired result. At least, especially in the mental game department. Are you following Phil Galfond challenge at all?
Yes, I do.
All right. Let's talk about that a bit, because you know what, the way I see it, and let me just describe, the things that I've been seeing in this challenge, they sort of hit a lot of the principles that you were talking about, tilt control, growth mindset, being professional, all of these things. They really stand out in this challenge, because especially like if we think about the length of the challenges and all the pressures of the challenges, etc., there are so many things in terms of mental game that are going on here, right? And I've been commentating the challenge on the Run It Once channel. I've been making some videos on my own YouTube channel about the whole thing. So naturally, a lot of people reached out to me with their opinions, with their questions about what's going on in the challenge. And it really seems like a lot of people are trying to, well, I don't want to say simplify things, but they're really happy to just put labels on what's going on. What I mean is just a lot of people are pretty happy to say, no, Phil is outclassed. Phil sucks, basically. That's the bottom line. Like, Vinny is crushing. I mean, obviously, there's a camp of people who think, oh, he's a GTO bot. He's using, some software real time and some other bullshit like this, all the conspiracy theories and just all the ridiculous stuff. But, the other camp is basically saying that, well, Phil is just so bad compared to Vinny Vidi that this is just ridiculous, etc., etc. If we step back from all of that, the reality is they only play 10,000 hands, right? Obviously, Vinny came in the challenge better prepared. So, especially in the beginning of the challenge, obviously he had a bit of an edge, at least a bit of an edge, right? But we can't measure the edge from 10,000 hands, right? Underestimating the importance of variance is a huge thing that guides a lot of people into big trouble, because the thing you've mentioned, that you're not entitled to win, your flips. So many people basically go on tilt when they lose 3 flips in a row, and it's just like, oh, it's so unfair, this shouldn't happen, etc., etc. The reality is it's going to happen. It's going to happen some of the time. It's not going to happen too often, just statistically, but things are going to happen, right? The question is, how do we cope with these things? So when people are talking about how bad Phil is, I'm thinking to myself, guys, you're missing the point here. As a professional poker player, you should see how great Phil is, because the way he handles the things that are happening, I don't know of many other people who would be able to handle it in the same way. And the reality is, in poker, you're going to lose sometimes. You're going to have stretches of losing, etc., etc. The question is it going to trigger you losing half of your bankroll like it happened to you some 10 years ago? Or are you just going to be seeing it as part of business, and let's just learn from our mistakes, have the growth mindset, be professional, stick to our process, make good decisions, evaluate how we play, and just take it from there? And these are all the behaviors that Phil is actually displaying publicly. And somehow that is just unnoticed, and people just keep concentrating on he's getting crushed. He's just probably he's losing like 100 big blinds or whatever per 100.
Mm-hmm. And what is the question here? Or
that's what I'm thinking. I made a pause because I'm thinking, what is the question? It's not really a question. It's just, I think with what Phil is doing, because it's so public and because there was nothing really on that level before, right? Because their challenge, it was nothing like that. They didn't have the stipulations that you have to play 5 days a week. If you don't play, you are paying penalties, etc., etc. This is probably the first time when the contest of poker is actually a contest of poker, which brings in all of the aspects of what it takes to be a poker player. It's not only about making decisions. People are talking about Vinny having the edge. Okay, what if he was running bad? How would he handle these things? Would he still play his A game all the time? Because reality is nobody is capable of playing A game 5 days a week, every week, right? Things are bound to happen. You're not going to be fully focused. You lacked sleep. Something happened there. As a professional, your goal is to eliminate these distractions, right? To be able to have the routine that is helping you with being as productive as you can be. But that's part of business. That's part of what it is to be a poker player. Instead of this romantic idea of, if you're really smart, if you really know how to play your ranges in the 3-bet pot, then you're a winning player. There's more to it. There's so many quote unquote winning players who go on a monkey tail once a year and they lose, half the bankroll or something ridiculous like that. And it basically costs them a full year of work.
Yeah, there's a lot of different aspects here to actually discuss. So definitely, that's super exciting thing. This Galfond challenge. I think that's the biggest thing in online poker since Black Friday, basically.
Yeah.
There's a lot of excitement here. Actually, this challenge requires from both players a lot of professionalism. So I would be involved in this challenge. I would think, okay, so I need to plan my, let's say, meal delivery. I need to plan my sport. I need to plan my day. I need to find the people who will be helping me with analysis and have a good sleep habits. And I will have the best supplements available there to have a better focus and so on. So I would organize everything so that I can be in my best shape, everything around me. And I think that challenge really requires that. And from the other side, there's a lot of mental game pressure involved because it's so public, and especially for Phil, because for Venny it's just his nickname, and for Phil it's his name, his face, his reputation, his companies. So naturally it should be much tougher for him to handle losses than for Venny. And I agree that he's doing it with a lot of class, I would say, and he's handling that very, very professionally. It also reminded me about topic of very important mental game techniques called visualization. So this is a technique also used in sports that can be applied very well here to this kind of challenge. So, for example, in football, you can use visualizations to relax and imagine yourself how will you handle a situation where you missed 100% chance, and you have to deal with that. You have to come back to focus and really play your best for the rest of the match. And I think here the same thing can be applied. So all poker world is watching you, And what happens if you lose a couple of big hands in a row? What happens if you make a big mistake? What happens if you make a very bad call down or very bad bluff? You have to be prepared mentally for that in advance. So when it happens, you are ready and you are not thinking in a moment how to deal with that, but your brain has already shaped some form of way of dealing that.
Right. Because of course, as a visualization, as a technique, it's a cheaper way to gain that experience, instead of gaining it actually from first having it happen and then
Exactly.
having to figure it out along the way. Yeah. So let's get back to your own journey right now. You're trying to focus fully on poker. So how does your day look like?
As probably most of poker players, I'm waking up quite late. So it's more like 10:30. However, probably a lot of players waking up even later. During first part of the day, I'm mostly working on my game, working in Monker, doing different kinds of analysis, going through different kind of pillow material. I try to have some time where I will either go to the gym or go for a long, like 1 hour walk. And I usually start a session about 6:30 or 7 p.m. and then play like till 11 or midnight. In between, I'm spending some time with my wife. We either talk, go for a walk, or watching some serials and go to sleep. It's very important during the day to have meals very, very well planned. Right now, I'm using meal delivery company, so I have all meals delivered to me like in the morning, so I don't have to worry about this during the day. Yeah, I think that like that these are the main points of my day.
Mm-hmm. All right. So it's interesting that you choose to work on your game when you wake up and where you're the freshest, and then focus on playing in the evening. For me, it's quite the opposite. I usually prefer to start the day with the games, and then because I just feel more productive first half of the day, which obviously sucks because of my time zone. So many times I have to miss out on the games, but you know. And this is actually, a thing that you can probably give me some practical advice on, because you've mentioned that you had to step away from all the other commitments that you had, all the coaching, or at least, the bulk of it, to focus on your own game. For me, I was actually struggling with this thing recently myself, right? Because I piled up so many commitments in my life with, some business commitments which have nothing to do with poker, and of course, being a head coach for Love the Spot, having the students, having the podcast, just doing a lot of work. And at some point I came to a realization, so what's my identity really? Who am I? Am I a content producer for YouTube? Not really. That's not what I aspire to do. I like to do it. I like to share my ideas and share my conversations with people like yourself, with the public, but that's not something that I, aspire to be. And so I came to a realization, well, listen, I'm a poker player. I want to be a poker player. I want to keep being a poker player. But then if I look at my day, I had to realize, is it really a day of a poker player? Considering how many hours could I put in poker, especially like the beginning of this year in January, because of course, January was pretty difficult for me in terms of I was moving to a new place. So a lot of relocation, setting up the office, a lot of administrative stuff, etc., etc. So poker sort of got pushed onto like number 5 on the list of things to do. And well, recently I managed to basically rearrange everything in a way that again, I'm putting in long hours, long sessions, and just being basically present every time there's a game. I'm there, I'm available. So that's something that happened in my own life recently. What's your idea about trying to combine different things with being a poker player? Because of course you've been there, you've done it, and you decided to step away from everything else to focus on poker only. What's your opinion on actually doing more things?
Yeah, it's complicated because there are a lot of things, like a lot of different topics involved here. So from the point of view of pure like poker effectiveness, probably it's the best just to focus on poker. But very often it's not that simple, because we are human beings, and poker career can last many years. As I told you, I've been playing already for 10 years. And within the 10 years, you can have other needs. So besides the need of playing poker, you can have other needs. Like, for example, for me, it's like teaching, sharing the knowledge, like having a feeling that I have a positive impact on some other people. It cannot be always bought by money. So, so for some people who are focused only on the money, it's probably much easier to all career focus only on poker. But if you have if you feel like you have some other potentials, other talents that you would like to be pursuing, then becomes much more complicated. And very often it may be actually very good to have something else besides the poker, because then you will satisfy other needs besides poker, and this way you can like be more happy, more satisfied, and more productive as a poker player. And also, very often, I think most of players are anyway at least a bit results oriented, or quite a bit, or very results oriented. And for results oriented people, if all your life is poker and you're on the downswing and you're losing, you can feel like, okay, my whole life sucks. Because it's true, if you only think about results and your results are very bad, then you can say to yourself, okay, everything for me is going very bad. So if you have some other things besides poker, some other commitments, some other activities, you can then say, okay, but not everything is going bad, because even though I'm on the downswing, my business that I'm starting to grow is going well. Okay, my YouTube channel is, people are really happy with the content I'm making, and my book is good. You can have some other things that can give you the feeling of some small successes, some small wins, and it might be much easier to handle like tougher times.
Very interesting. Yeah, because it brings up to my mind something that, because I remember my journey with battling tilt, right? Because of course I've also been playing over 10 years now, probably like 13 years or so professionally. And, in my journey, at one point I realized that poker, if I treat it as work, then it's work. When the laptop is off or the computer is off, the work stays there. Because I remember episodes where, I would play the whole day, and then I had a dinner scheduled with friends. I would go for dinner and I would feel miserable throughout the whole evening, because I would be still dwelling on, it was a super bad day. This happened, that happened. What's the point of going to that dinner? You're not present, you're not enjoying it, you're not actually refreshing yourself for the next day, you're not really having a life. So I remember that episode specifically because for me that was like a key point at which I realized, okay, you know what, this doesn't work. I need to start making sure that I leave the work at work and I don't bring this baggage elsewhere, right? And it kind of ties in with what you were saying, that, you know, if things are going bad in poker, if poker is your life, then basically things are going bad in your life. To me, early on already, before I started doing any other things on the side, early on already, I made this sort of decision, but, you know, this transition in treating it completely as work. And, you know, shit happens at work, fine, my life is still fine, because I'm not defined by my work. And I think that's really important for a lot of people to make this distinction, you know, because I see it over and over again with a lot of people. They basically don't switch off, and whatever happens in poker spills into the rest of the life, you know. And for people who are in a relationship, you know, very often those bad things from poker spill over to how you spend time with your wife, with your girlfriend, and that's really unhealthy.
Mm-hmm. This also like reminds me about interesting discovery that I made. So for many years, I believed that the best poker players are those who treat poker like their main passion. They're obsessed about the poker. They are not really that much about the money, and they focus more like on just being the best, you know, competition and so on. But with more experience and getting to know more players from different level, like lower level, mid level, the highest level, I realized that it's probably not true. And a lot of like the very best players are actually treating poker very like professionally, like typically like a business. And this helps them to, as you said, like to leave work at work and to have more, keep more work-life balance, but also to be less emotionally attached to different kind of like bad events, you know, as downswings, and I think be more professional in general. I think if you like the negative thing about treating poker as a passion can be that if you are running really bad, you can say, "Oh my God, I love poker so much. This is my, you know, this is the biggest passion of my life. And what are you doing to me? What are you doing to me? You are hurting me." And if you treat this professional, you can think, okay, maybe I will switch and I play on different side. Maybe I get a coaching. Maybe I try to get to lower stakes, or maybe I should just keep going and everything will come back to you know, to the right direction. And you are not, you know, complaining that much and so on. So I thought in the past that treating poker as a passion, of course, it has a lot of merits, has a lot of benefits, but I thought that it has only benefits. And right now, I'm not so sure. I think there are also negative sides to treating poker only like a passion. As I said, there's a lot of benefits to that, but there are also some negative sides, and it's good to be aware of all of that.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially if we talk about treating poker as only the passion. That is very dangerous, right? Because you can be very passionate about poker and yet still be a professional first and foremost, right? I mean, it's just a beautiful combination when, you know, you have a profession which you truly enjoy. That's great, you know. But if the only thing that drives you is this passion, you know, there's a lot of, you know, dangers along the way. And also coming back to, you know, this thing that we just discussed, what came to my mind is when you talked about, you know, your experience with losing 50% of your bankroll, the trigger was that $1 loss on day 19, right? It's such an ego thing because a lot of people attach their ego to their results. So when you face that $1 loss after 18 sessions of profit, it somehow becomes personal. And that is so dangerous. Whenever poker becomes personal, that you think your results define who you are, it's just such a slippery slope.
Yes, I totally agreed. It was even more than that. It wasn't only ego. It was a lot also about perfectionism that I've been working on for many years. I think I got much better in this area because it was more about my results have to look perfect. And when it's in green in Hold'em Manager, it looks perfect. Everything is in green, and one red mark will like destroy this perfect image. So I need to keep this perfect image, and I need to keep playing to have everything in green. So it was a lot about that, and it also comes down to defining what is the good session for you. I think on some very basic level, at some point, you need to answer yourself on this question: what does it mean for you that the session is good? And very often, for many players who suffer some mental game issues, the good session is very often related only or mostly with positive result, and that's actually a pretty bad definition. Of course, good session can be like a little bit like, let's say, 15% dependent on a result, but the majority of your definition of good session should be factors that you can fully control, like the quality of the decisions you are making, the level of your mental game, the level of your focus, how you are selecting tables, managing the whole sessions, taking breaks, and so on and so on. This can be like the main factors. Of course, it can be like a little small thing that the cherry on top that, it feels better when it's ended with a profit, but, it cannot be like the main factor.
Yeah, and it's definitely really dangerous when people have it as the main factor or even like a big contributing factor. And it's not only dangerous long term, it's really dangerous short term as well, because if that's the approach somebody has, that the result matters, or let's say the green graph matters, right? The example that you mentioned before. If that's the case, these people usually play shorter sessions when they're up because they're afraid to ruin this perfect image of the green graph, right? Especially if the graph is really green. They just 1, 2, 3 flips in a row and it looks like, oh, this is going to be a great day. All of a sudden, making this great day into like an average day really hurts. And people just quit because, okay, well, let's just keep this graph because somehow the graph is important, right? It shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be, but it is. And that's what happens a lot. And that's why also a lot of people who focus on the results and, let's just put it in simple terms, the green graph or the red graph. The problem with hoping for always a green graph is that when you are in the red, you don't really care if it's a bit in the red or a lot in the red. And that's how those losing 50% of your bankroll or things like this, that's how it happens.
Yes, exactly. I was doing like similar experiment at many lectures that I was conducting. So I was asking the audience, let's say 100 people there, very few, let's say, poker players at the audience. And I was asking them, okay, imagine you have a drawing, kind of like lottery, and you can choose between taking immediately $75 profit or having a drawing where you have 75% probability of winning $100 and 25% probability of winning nothing. And like 90% of people go for $75. And then I ask opposite question. Okay, so imagine you can take guaranteed $75 loss, or you have a drawing where you have 25% chances that you will get even, or 75% chances that you will be minus $100. And now every people, over 90% of people, they pick a drawing. So now they want to take their chances and get even. And this is so much connected with emotional approach to results and attaching pain and pleasure. Because if we end a session with a profit, it's a pleasure. But the pleasure of winning $75 and $100, it's almost the same. It doesn't feel that much different if you win a little bit more or less. However, if you end the session break even, it feels bad because you could already guarantee yourself a profit. On the other hand, if you are losing, whether you lost $75 or $100, it feels almost the same. It feels bad. It's a pain. However, if you had an even small chance of being even, then getting even from a situation when you were losing feels very well. It's a pleasure. it's the opposite of pain. That's why people are choosing very often to quit prematurely winning sessions and continue very long with the sessions that they are losing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Do you actually suffer with these things yourself still to this day?
No. This problem, I can say I have eliminated 100%. So usually I base the length of my session either on the predetermined schedule or how tired or focused I am, or I can be a bit flexible if there is a especially good table, so I can stay a bit longer even if I'm not super focused. Okay, this is so good game that I can sacrifice a bit of EV because this table is so good that I'm making, even with B minus game, I'm still making a solid profit, so I can, stay a bit longer. But that doesn't matter that much if I'm losing or winning.
Right. Cool. Let's talk a bit about goal setting. You have a full chapter on goal setting in your book. Goal setting in poker is a specific thing, right? Because you can't really set results-oriented goals because you can't control the results, right? So what are your suggestions for goal setting for people out there?
So basically, we can take a lot here from sports psychology. So in sports psychology, you have two types of goals. So we have performance goals and outcome goals. So outcome goals in the poker language will be those goals related with the outcome, with the results. So I want to win WSOP bracelet this year. I want to be top 10 GPI rating. I want to win $200,000 this year, and so on. These are not bad goals, but the thing is that each outcome goal has to be followed with at least 3 to 5 performance goals, which are totally dependent on us. So goals based on how you get there. It's not about only where you want to where do you want to get, but also how you want to get there. So, for example, by doing more sports, by sleeping better, by having better diet, by working better on your game, by hiring some coaches, and so on, by putting so much volume. So in reality, maybe let's start with another concept first. It will be a bit easier. So in general, we have two types of motivation. People usually divide motivation into external and internal, but we can also divide motivation into motivation of outcome motivation and motivation also performance type of motivation. So outcome type of motivation is the motivation where you are motivated only by the outcomes, by results, by money, by winning, by being number one. And performance type of motivation is when you are motivated more by improving, by getting your skills to higher level, by, let's say, improving your mindset, improving your game, by working in some programs, and so on. These are two completely different types of motivations. And the research has shown that most of the best sportsmen, they have a perfect balance, more or less 50-50 between those two types of motivation. Cristiano Ronaldo could be a perfect example. So from one side, he's a guy who always talks about winning titles, about winning individual titles. However, from another perspective, also he's working very hard and he's talking a lot about improving, getting better every day, improving his skills. So he has a perfect mix of both types of motivation. And actually, it's also a bit dangerous to be focused only on this performance goals. So only to have a type of motivation related with getting better. It's also okay to have a little bit of motivation related with just winning title, with winning specific amount of money. It cannot be like your only motivation, then it's very bad. But it's okay if you have, let's say, goal of winning $200,000 this year, and then you add like 5-6 smaller goals that are totally dependent on you. Because then at the end of the year, even if you will not achieve it, if you win, let's say 150, but you realize all other goals, you can say, okay, this goal has been achieved 75%, but all other goals has been achieved 100%. So it's been very good year. And also these monetary goals, they don't have to be treated like, I want to get there, and let's say if I get there after 3 months, I'm not playing all the year. It's more about like, kind of like intention, a kind of like something that you are going to get, but it doesn't have to limitate you. So there are definitely ways of setting like outcome goals in a very good way. But with setting goals, the most interesting things is that for poker players, setting goals is actually in general quite easy, because setting goals, it's very difficult. Planning, it's very difficult in business, where you have like dozens of different projects and you need to meetings, negotiations, you have, marketing, sales, distribution, everything, and you need to coordinate all of that projects. And then planning becomes very difficult and complex. In poker, it's quite easy. So tools are not that important, and tools are usually not the thing that are stopping people from planning. And also, I hope you'll understand me well, that the planning itself doesn't bring us as many benefits as putting yourself in a state of mind when you are planning. Because when you are planning, you are thinking in long-term perspective. You are thinking more about what will be beneficial to you in 1 year, 2 year, 5 years perspective. So let's say when you have this long-term perspective, I'm pretty sure that you will be looking in different way about your health, about your eating habits, about working on your game, about some of your daily habits. So putting yourself in this state of mind helps to organize the day around the right habits, put the right things in your day. And that's like the main benefit of planning, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It definitely is really useful as an exercise, because at least you're getting some direction, at least you know what you're working towards. What do you think? Because I just thought about the fact that maybe the goal setting changes as you achieve more in poker. Because let me give you an example, right? Because you were talking about setting like a 200,000 profit for the year as your goal, and I totally see how for a mid-stakes player, for example, that's a good and healthy goal, right? That's something that you are working towards. That's a specific goal in mind. But I recently had a podcast with MMA Sherdog, who's of course one of the top players in Hold'em, and he has a similar approach to me in a way that we don't set a monetary goal, right? But the reason, for example, the reason I don't set a monetary goal is that I don't feel that it is a productive one for me, because apart from not being able to control the results, I also can't control the games, the availability of the games, right? Because, for example, the simplest example would be, right, we're recording this on a Tuesday, and on Saturday and Sunday, especially on Sunday, I managed to play 1,000 hands at 10K PLO, right, in one day. And this is year 2020. This never happens. Like, it so rarely happens that you actually manage to put in 1,000 hands at the highest stakes, right? The reality is, I don't know how available the games are going to be. And let's face it, at those stakes, the swings are huge, right? I mean, if your goal is winning 200,000 a year, well, maybe you just win it in one day. And that's the problem with the goal setting. When you reach a specific point in your career, the monetary goal setting, there are so many more factors that are absolutely out of your control, right? When I was doing the Supernova Elite year, having a monetary goal was a super good thing to have, right? Because first of all, you're aiming at a specific win rate, and also you're aiming at the rakeback deal, etc., etc. So at least you know what you're working towards, and you know why you're actually working the super long days for the whole year.
Yeah, you reminded me about a couple of interesting concepts. So I totally agree that like this monetary goals can be especially useful for like micro, low, and mid stakes players. I think high stakes is a bit of different word, because as you said, on at high stakes level you cannot control the game's availability. You don't know how many hands you will play, like at PLO, let's say 10K. This year it may be like 15, 20,000 hands. And so the swings and the variance will have so big impact on your results. Then setting monetary goals in this like area doesn't make that much sense. And you can like exchange it for like other goals. But for many, I would say up to Zoom 500 players or mid-stakes players, I think it will make more sense because they have more control over the results throughout the whole year, especially if they are making like a lot of volume. If you know that somebody will play, let's say, 600K hands during a year at Zoom 500, he has much more control over more or less what kind of results he can expect.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree on that point. Because of course, at those stakes, the games are there, right? So if you put in, if you're disciplined enough to have your stable routines, if you are working on all the other aspects of what it takes to be a professional poker player, those goals are achievable, and those goals are motivating for a lot of people. And there's another aspect with setting goals, which I think also changes once you reach a specific level, right? Because very often, with some people, a lot of my students actually, they come into our program, the Coaching for Profit program, with aspiration to become a high stakes player, right? Which is a great goal, and I like when people get into it with a goal like this in mind. The thing is, once you reach a specific level, then what, right? We have to be careful with being flexible with how we adjust to our identity of who we are, and where we're trying to get to. Because again, an example from my experience is I never really had aspirations to become one of the best players in the world, right? That was never a driving factor for me. And I sort of never had this goal of I must be at the very, very top. But then the closer I got to the top, then the more enticing it became, right? I sort of figured, well, how about I become even better? How about I become even better and even better? And once I reached the top, which basically means there are no higher stakes games online running than the games that I'm already playing. I'm already sitting and controlling the tables. Sort of, you lack this goal of we can go even higher, right? And it wasn't a problem for me at all, because it was not why I did it in the first place. But I saw I saw some people that I know on a personal basis that also achieved great success in their poker games, whatever the game is. and then sort of hit this part where so you don't have a motivation, a driving factor anymore, because you achieved everything that you set out to do, and they don't have other motivation to push them forward. I suppose it doesn't happen for somebody who's playing a mid stakes, because if their aspiration is, to reach a certain level, but could it ever be a problem for somebody who's only motivated by some sort of challenge? Because an example that comes to mind, right, is Tyson Fury. I don't know if you follow boxing at all, but this example.
Not much lately.
Yeah, because the example comes to my mind just because this amazing fight was just 2 days ago, and it was an incredible fight. But what comes to mind is when he beat Klitschko, right? He had the aspiration to beat the best. Klitschko was the lineal champion of the world, right? So he beat the champ. He became the lineal champion, which was something that he always aspired to do. And we all know what happened after, right? He basically went on this crazy coke-driven party lifestyle, which almost got him killed because he tried to commit suicide, right? And it's a very sort of dramatic example of what can happen. But it's something to think about, because for some people who are really only driven by a specific achievement goal in mind, and there's nothing else, like they sort of almost like have blinders on of that's the the final destination where I'm going. Once you reach the final destination and there's nothing else, it's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Like with the motivation, this is like the one of the very few topics that like is so individual, because on most of the other things, like the mental game approach, being professional, results oriented, discipline, planning, we can talk on some general levels, and we can pick some rules that in general will work for all people, or at least most of people. Like most of the concepts will work in a similar way. But motivation is one of the few things that people are so different, that it's so hard to like get into the mind of why we are like, doing things that we are doing. Yeah, it's a pretty complex topic, and yeah.
Right. Well, let's switch to another topic. Let's think about a theoretical example of a person coming in to become a professional poker player. They're not a professional poker player yet, which means, they might still have a job, or they just recently quit a job. They already know how to play poker, so that's not the issue. Doesn't mean that they play it good, but, at least they're not like completely new to the game. They already put in some volume, so they know that that's something they enjoy, and they are happy to play long hours. This idea of being a professional poker player, I think there are so many different opinions, what people have when they start out, what it's going to look like, right? There's no consensus on what it's going to look like. What would you say to a person who's, let's say they're coming in and they say, I want to be a cash game PLO player? Could you give them like a little story of how it's going to look like? What is going to be their life if they actually pursue this?
Right now, probably I would say it's not worth to start.
Really? That bad?
Yeah, I mean, you have to always like consider like given career in comparison to others. I think, let's say, right now it might be better to become programmist or IT guy, and you can probably earn similar money or a bit less, but with a perspective that you will be making, very good money for the rest of your life. Whereas in poker, we cannot be, so sure about that. And definitely, what I would say, I would try to show all image with all advantages and disadvantages. First of all, I think poker is a great tool of self-development. And I think it's I think there's not enough content on like YouTube or like business professional trainings that uses this enough. I think poker can be amazing tool of personal development, much better than most of the other tools that are available in the market. Because unlike other things, poker is like a speaker for our mental game, for our character. So if you are struggle with basically anything, let's say with losing, with winning, with making mistakes, it will, like, poker will reveal that, and it will bring the situation to you sooner or on later, and will test your personality on this situation. And poker will show you, like, on a tray, here it is something that you struggle with. This is something that you need to work on in order, like, to improve your personality. Whereas in other fields, even like in business, you can have like successful businessman who is like, who didn't manage to control his emotions for most of his career, and he became like top CEO of some company. Whereas in poker, it's basically impossible. So it's definitely a great way for people who love improving, who love improving their character, fighting with like their weaknesses and becoming better. I think I would start with that. Yeah, and also it's like 100-meter run at Olympics. That's it's like a limited. It's a place where not everybody is winning. Definitely, like, let's say 10% of poker players are winning players, and then like 1% maybe it's winning like a really, really, really good money. So you have to, like, from the very beginning, be aware that you cannot be like average. You cannot do the same things that average people do, just watching some random videos or reading some random books and putting not that much effort from yourself. You have to do much more than that in order to get to this top 1% of players. If you're not ready to do that, maybe it's better to just pursue other career. But if you are, then maybe poker it's a good career to start.
Right. I think it's an important point that you mentioned, and I want to later get back and focus to what you said about that. Maybe it's not worth getting into it, right? But we'll address it later. First, I want to, talk about this thing that you've just mentioned, that it's not easy. Basically, it's not easy. If you think that it's just going to be a breeze and you're going to start playing poker, you read a book or two, and you get an advice from a couple people, and you're going to be crushing. That's not the case. But the reality is, it's not the case with anything. Like, if we think about golfers, right? Kind of a easy example of, you know what, the top professionals, they earn millions and they are super rich and they have all the sponsorship deals from Nike and whatever, right? Yeah, but that's, again, it's like 1% of golfers, and the rest are barely struggling to make any money. And in reality, they would be probably better off financially by just doing something else, just having a proper career. We're always drawn to the big success stories. Like, if you think about soccer or any other sport, you always think about, in soccer, that's going to be Ronaldo, Messi, any of those guys, and you think, oh, this is possible, you can achieve it. Yeah, it is, but it's like not even 1%, it's 0.1% that actually achieve these heights. And plus, how many of those successful people are successful only on the front, only sort of from outside, but in reality their life is really unbalanced and they're basically broke before they become 40. That happens all the time. But yeah, the thing about maybe it's not worth it, let's focus on that a bit, because to me, some important things that you've said there is that, first of all, that maybe like 10% of people are actually making money in poker from all the poker players is probably close to true. That's actually a reason for getting into poker in a way, because there's 90% of people who are losing money, right? So there's plenty of people who are losing money, and that money is for you to take, but only if you realize that it's going to be hard work. You're going to have to basically outwork 90% of the people out there. So if you're not willing to take it super seriously, then it's probably not worth it. It's much easier to make a stable job by being whatever, even if it's a programmer. Yes, you're going to have to study a lot, etc., etc. Even if you're an accountant, if you're a lawyer, or anything, you don't have these extra pressures. You don't have some insecurity from financial perspective long term, and all of these things. But at the same time, if somebody is a hardworking, highly motivated, driven person, I think poker is a great field to get into still to this day. And also the thing that you've described, that, with poker, if you treat it as a tool that's going to mold you personally and, help you sort of become stronger in terms of your mental game, which applies to everything in life, really. It's a great tool. It's a great field to be in.
Yeah, exactly. It's what you said. If you are willing to be like very competitive and outwork other people, you can consider this kind of field, because let's like have some abstract example of like picking fruits, like picking strawberries. Okay,
right.
Let's say by picking strawberries you make $500 per month. Okay, so if you are the best of picking strawberries in the world, you are much faster, having better technique and everything, maybe you will make like 1,500. There is no way that you will like make more. Okay, but if you're like even like big edges here transfer into bigger profit, but not that bigger profit. If you are like a salesman in the big like a shop, if you are like the best salesman, maybe you will get like 10% bonus in comparison with other. In let's say in soccer, if you are like 10% faster, 10%, if you have like a bit, your shoot is 10% better header, and so on, you can get not like 50% or 100% higher salary, but your salary will be 1,000 times more. Okay, you will not get like, let's say, $1,000 per month, but you will get 1 million per month. That's like a difference. So there are some disciplines where small edges transfer into like a huge increases in salaries, because like I imagine like Ronaldo is not like 1,000 times faster than like a guy from some like regional soccer club, but more like, let's say, 10% or 20% faster than him, and like in most of the categories he will be like 10-20% better. But if you combine all of that, it's it's worth 1,000 times more like salary per month. And I think poker is much closer to soccer in that area than to picking strawberries. Yeah.
Definitely that. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. So here it's some small edges. If you're a bit better like pre-flop, a bit better on the flop, a bit better with sizings, with statistics, with tilt control, with organizing your time and all that stuff, like in total it can transfer to having like 100 times higher salary than other players, for example.
No, I think poker is in fact even closer to sports like golf or tennis, where you actually earn the bulk of your income comes from participating in tournaments and the prize money, basically. Because in football you still get your salary, right? Because we see, for example, somebody gets injured for like 1.5 years, but they still have 2-year contract. Well, guess what? They're still getting 2 years of the salary, right? In golf and tennis, you're out. And that's it. Obviously, the successful people there also make money from sponsorship deals and all the other deals. But, if we talk purely the sports income, poker probably is closer to those types of individual sports where the money comes from winning competitively. right? Right. Interesting. What do you think are like the biggest misconceptions about poker that people who get into the game, they might have some idea about what they're going to be facing or what they're going to be facing, and it's far from reality?
I think from what I'm talking sometimes with my friends who know very little about the poker, I think the main misconception that is poker is so much about like cheating and treating other. It's all about tricking other people, and in order to win money, you have to be tricky. So you have to call aces pre-flop, raise with like weak hands, and to just do always the opposite of the hand that you have. And I always give him like hold'em example, because usually they play hold'em. So I say, okay, you raise pre-flop aces, you play against calling station. The board is like queen, 5 deuce, 8 deuce, let's say, and you triple barrel aces and you like shove all in on the river, and they call you with king queen and you win. Were you tricky? And they said, no. Okay, you demonstrated strength pre-flop. You demonstrated strength on the flop, turn, and river, and you won the money. And if you will be trying to slow play and so on, you will just get a third of his stack, not the full stack. So the poker is not about being tricky, but sometimes you have to be tricky, but it's about just finding the way to be the most profitable, to win the most money. And I think that's something that like beginners don't get.
Right. Interesting. Another thing that comes to my mind is poker as a profession. It's so unstructured by external factors. There's no 9 to 5. There's no boss. There's nobody to tell you, hey, you know what? Now is the time you need to work. Now is the time you need to study. Now is the time you need to analyze your game. There's none of that. So basically, there's everybody who gets into it at some point, they start with like a blank page and they fill that page themselves. What do you think are the biggest mistakes people make in this regard by planning their week, planning their day? What are the things that sort of hold people back the most?
Like finding the right rhythm of the day, finding the right plan of the day. I think it's one of the most important things, actually. And there are a couple of big mistakes. I think one of the main ones that I was dealing with as a mental game coach is to perceive any form of planning as a limitation of their freedom. So a lot of poker players, they choose poker because they value freedom and independence, and these are one of their main values. And when they start planning or getting a bit more organized or disciplined, they perceive that as a limitation to their freedom. So the value that they choose poker for in the first place. And I see a lot of conflicts here with the like willingness of planning in the first place. If somebody wants to find their perfect rhythm of the day, or at least very good rhythm or plan of the day, then sooner or later he will find it by testing, reading, and so on. As I said, planning for poker players, it's not that complex as for other professions. We don't have to combine that many different types of activities and projects. And the main activity of our day is just the session, that it's usually between like 4 to 6 hours, 7 hours. And it's usually like in one streak or with like some shorter breaks. So it's really not that easy to organize a day around it. The more difficult thing is if somebody is, willing to plan his day in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's a good point. Yeah, people are averse to planning because they feel like it goes against the idea of freedom. And in fact, if you plan your day carefully, all you get is freedom, right? Because if you plan it in such a way where you don't have to always make a decision. Because like a lot of people suffer with, oh, should I play now? Should I not play now? Can I go for dinner? Can I not go for dinner? You know, all the time, like these thoughts of like, oh, what should I do? Is it okay? You know, it's not a very enjoyable life. If you know that your hours are these hours and somebody says, hey, you want to go hang out? No, I can't. I'm working right now. We can go like 2 hours later. And then you go with this freedom emotionally with no baggage of like, oh, I should have played. The games were good, etc., etc. Especially for the mid stakes and low stakes people. You know, whenever somebody's telling me, especially at the low stakes and even mid stakes, right? Oh, I had to play like I played because there was this fish. It was just an incredible opportunity. Like, what are you talking about? This fish or another fish is going to be every day. There's going to be a situation like this. You know, this is not some sort of once in a lifetime opportunity. You might think it is, but it's not, right? And a lot of people are sort of, basing their day based on these external factors of like, oh, I absolutely must play. There's this huge whale. It's true for high stakes. Some days there's this huge whale, and yeah, you're gonna have to play. But just because the next time you see him might be in like 6 months or 9 months, but that's not the case for lower stakes.
Yes, exactly, and this way, these players may not have enough of other activities, like to go for a walk, to go for the gym, to go for running. It's very important to have this other activities that will help you to stay fresh during the session, and with the right amount of energy. You cannot sacrifice that just for the fish, unless, as you said, it's like a high stakes and it's like a very rare opportunity, but it doesn't happen on lower stakes.
Exactly. And also one aspect of freedom that people misunderstand. Just because you have freedom of time doesn't mean your life is free. Because if you're wasting that time, like all your free time, you're just wasting on some bullshit activities, or worse yet, you have that free time, but your mind is not free because you're still very much stuck in that last session that you played, and it's still on your mind, and whatever you're doing, you're still thinking about it. Especially, it's a lot of people get into this mindset when they had a bad session, right? Then these bad emotions, bad thoughts, they stick to them, and they don't enjoy whatever other activities they're doing. They might be having a dinner with friends or with their spouse or anything, or they go to a cinema, watch a movie, but in fact, they're not even watching it. They're thinking about whatever happened. This is such a big thing that hurts your freedom. Because sure, you have free time, but you're not really free. So all the things like routines and proper plan, etc., that really helps you with these things. At least from my experience, I know for me it was very important to, I already gave you this example of realizing that I have to leave the work at work and switch off for the rest of the day.
Yeah, there's definitely a paradox inside of like being disciplined versus like freedom. So let's imagine that you have somebody graduating from university and somebody who wants to have like unlimited freedom and just works very little, going to a lot of parties, no responsibilities, no discipline. What will actually happen is that this person in his like low 30s will not have his own flat and will have to like rent a flat, will probably work very like shitty job, and in this job he will be dependent on the employer. He will not have like enough money to go for vacation, so he will not have a freedom of choice. He cannot choose if he can work or not because he has to, because he doesn't have any financial liquidity. So actually, like choosing freedom for a couple of years will usually lead to having like no freedom at all when you are older. And on the opposite side, if somebody chooses to really focus on the career, be like super disciplined, let's say like soccer player who is like has to be super disciplined in his 20s, and then when he retires about 35 years, he can like no longer work anymore, and he has a freedom of going to like anywhere in the world, like going for holidays, having beautiful house and everything. So there is always a paradox inside like every this kind of psychological problem.
Right. Well, and there's always a price to pay. Any decision you make, there's a price. The decision to watch Netflix for a full week, it doesn't mean it's a bad decision. You want to do it, sure, do it. But you have to realize there's a price. For a poker player, it's very easy to just get into these unproductive things because there is no commitment. There is nobody waiting for you at work, right? So it's much easier to just basically keep doing some bullshit, but there's a price and you're going to have to pay it. So yeah, that's something to remember.
Yeah, I heard that Arnold Schwarzenegger said once something like, you can achieve anything you want in your life if you are willing to pay price for it. And I totally agree. Maybe not, anything, but close to that. You can really achieve a lot or almost anything that you want. But sometimes the cost can be, so high that if you calculate it, okay, you can decide, I don't want to really achieve that thing. And I want to go for, let's say, less, but be more happy, have like better relationship, more friends, better health, and so on.
Absolutely. And also it like relates to poker in a way that, whenever we think about success in poker, the visible one, of course, is, the people who achieved the most at the high stakes and are there, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not the only way to achieve success. The price that people at the highest stakes have to pay in terms of the sacrifice they need to make with their time, with their life, it's a steep price. You don't need to do that. You can achieve very comfortable level with the mistakes, with not so much stress, with not so much in terms of, how you need to invest in your studies, et cetera, et cetera. So there's different levels to success. And every level has its own price, in a way.
Yes, exactly.
All right. What else? I think we covered a lot of topics, a lot of good stuff. Anything else comes to your mind that we should address today?
I think there are two topics that comes to my mind: discipline, and I would like to talk a bit about the motivation. So earlier I mentioned that motivation is something that is very, very individual. And I really very rarely speak about this topic. Before I mentioned that I probably made over 300 or 400 mental game podcasts or videos for some Polish poker sites, but I don't know, maybe there was one or two on motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is because it's so individual and people really don't get it, especially when it comes to procrastination and so on. Usually, most of people think that what they need is more motivation. So if we use the metaphor of a car, they think that they need more acceleration. Now they need more speed.
Mm-hmm.
But usually this is not the case. Usually there is a brake that is stopping. That is something that is stopping them, like handbrake. That's why most of the, let's call this motivational events, motivational speeches, they simply don't work in the long term, because each individual with sort of mental game conflict on a motivational conflict will have some forces that trying to push him to do this, and some forces that are stopping him. And if you go for this kind of event, you are getting a lot of forces that are pushing you to do something. So probably after that you feel very motivated, and you will be very productive, very resourceful for next couple of days. But after 1 or 2 weeks, everything will come back to the reality. And again, your like forces that are pushing you and forces that are stopping you will be more or less like at the same level, and you will face the same problems that you were facing before because you didn't like solve the underlying problem. And what will happen is that people will think, okay, so I need a solution. So I need like more speeches, more trainings, this kind of more like motivational, kind of like entertaining like speeches. They will even think bad about themselves. So they'll think, okay, so there is something wrong with me. I cannot find motivation in myself. I need external sources for that. And that's, something that hits their feeling of like self-worth. And that's definitely something really bad. So that's kind of like a temporary solution. And usually the long-term solution is to really meet somebody like, I don't know, a coach, psychologist, or good psychotherapist with whom you can really talk about the topic and get to the real reasons why you are like procrastinating. Because usually you have a reason, you have like an additional benefit of not doing something. And this way, by really understanding this like reasons, you will like achieve much more than by looking for like motivational like tools or techniques. For example, in the past, I remember that I struggled a lot with sort of like simple house like works, like to fix something, change something, like using a drill machine or anything like that. I definitely have a like in this area. I had like completely like fixed mindset. I'm not good at that. I don't have a talent. I will not do that. Whenever there was a situation where I had to do something in the house or the flat, I would always procrastinate it and never like, do it. I will always postpone it or do something else. And it's not something that you can really fix with like any kind of like motivational speech. So at some point I realized that this is because of how like my childhood looks. So my father was like wonderful person, but he had this one thing that he was like super perfectionist, and he would very often give like to me and my brother some sort of like a task that was almost like very hard to handle or impossible to handle, and we wouldn't do that. And then he would come like criticize us and do it himself like in a very good way. So I would associate doing this small housework with like being criticized, with being not accepted, rejected, with kind of like quarrels, bad atmosphere, and so on. So only when I realized that I could like start working with that issue and solve it, but I had to really get like deep and also understand like my father's motivations, that he would like be like, for example, his self-worth will depend a lot on being resourceful and like being productive, being resourceful for the like family. So he would like provoke the situations where he would like give me and my brother the task that we cannot do, so that he would provoke the situation where he would be like resourceful in the eyes of other family members. He can like so that his quality that it's so important for him can be like visible to everybody like else in the family. So when I understood all of that, it actually made it much easier for me to motivate myself to this kind of like small houseworks. And this is kind of like example like how it's much better and how on much deeper level it's better to work with motivation, and how I don't like to covering this kind of topics in the book, because it's so hard to cover this in the book. It has to be really adjusted very individually to every person.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. And you're right. Yeah. It's probably the topic where it's the most individual. For me personally, there's one thing that I believe, and I don't, well, that's going to sound sensationalist, and that's not what really I mean, but like in a way, motivation is overrated when it comes to doing the work. I see it as, if we think about, a poker player who waits for the motivation to strike him to start playing a session, right? Oh, I want to play a session. I'm going to play a session. If that's the only process, it's a bit like a writer who is waiting for a muse before he starts writing, right? Might never fucking happen. What you need to do is you need to set up the processes, the routines that basically, your day starts at that time and it ends at that time. Do you have the motivation or not? That's not important. You better do the work, right? So for a true professional, they take that motivation out of the equation, right? That's why the routines, and we're going to talk about the discipline next, but these are the things that sort of tackle this problem of lack of motivation. Oh, I don't feel like playing poker today. Well, guess what? You're going to have to play poker today because that's what you planned, so you better execute, right? And the example that you mentioned with the small tasks like, drilling a hole in the wall or cleaning the garage or whatever, things that can always be postponed, and you procrastinate and you find all sorts of excuses not to do them. You don't schedule these things. You don't have routines in place which force you to do it. Well, it never gets done, and I can speak from my experience here totally because, I recently relocated to my new house. I still have so I set up my office perfectly, like the working space where I'm facing the wall. It's all clean and neat, and it's just the most productive environment. If I turn around and look at the rest of the room, there's still a couple boxes that need to be, moved away and things unpacked. And, I'm kind of deliberating, should I even bother unpacking them or just fucking throw it out? I don't even know what's there. But if I've been here for almost 2 months. Well, yeah, 2 months, and still didn't touch those boxes. Maybe I don't need them really. Anyway, I went off on a tangent there, but yeah, I think, with the motivation, having the routines, having the procedures that make you do the work, eliminate some of those triggers for procrastinating, triggers for not getting into it. Do you agree with this, or do you think that that's not really the case?
Yeah, this is the concept also from the power of habit. Actually, it's very important for us to have some habits, and there is a concept of so-called keystone habits. Mm-hmm. So habits that if you follow this habit, it actually starts like the whole chain of another habits that is, following this habit. So for example, if you start running, it's very likely that at some point you'll say to yourself, okay, I started running, so it's so much effort, so it makes no sense for me to eat all these donuts and pizzas, so maybe I'll start reading something about healthy, diet, and I will start eating more healthy. And then you started eating more healthy and running, so then, okay, so maybe I'll get some good sleep as well, yeah? And it's already like, 3 things just followed by one habit. And it's very often, it works like this. If you just implement one very important habit, a lot of other habits are following this. So for poker, one of this kind of keystone habits for me was always pre-session routine. I was also playing a lot with the pre-session routine. So very often the pre-session routine will, for me, consist of some breathing exercises, some sort of mental game preparation, and preparing everything on the desktop, listening to some music that will put me to the right mood for the game. So that would be like one thing that will be followed by many habits that will, prepare me very good in terms of mental game for the session. So yeah, so with all the motivation, I think it's like very good to put our energy to implement like the keystone habits that are the most important for our daily routine, and so that other good habits will be followed by this. For example, also if I have this meal delivery service, I'm eating like very healthy, I'm eating regularly, I don't have to worry about like not having meal. I can just go to the fridge and take it out. So that's like a lot of things followed by just one keystone habit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point. It's a very good point. And especially like with the pre-session warm-up or the pre-session routine, it also helps you to put your mind in the specific place. As with, some music can put you in the mindset, the right mindset, the state of flow or whatever you want to call it. And even, it's interesting, you've mentioned this food delivery thing several times, and it's really interesting, because obviously eating well is very important for anyone, but I don't want to say especially for poker players, because really for anyone it's important, clearly. Yet so many poker players sort of get into this routine of like whatever, eating junk food, frozen pizzas nonstop and all the bullshit. And it's ridiculous, because especially like you can afford a meal delivery service or whatever your solution is going to be. You can afford it. So it's not the problem of finance. It's the problem of just the lack of realization that, hey, this is a big part. This is a big part. If you treat it long term, again, same comes to every decision has a price, right? And I see it in a very acute form whenever I go to Vegas. I used to go for, and I mean the other destinations as well, but especially Vegas. And here's why. So I used to go for, let's say, 3 months at a time, right? The whole summer, and just play in the Bellagio for 3 months, Bellagio or Aria or whatever. And in the beginning, everybody's fresh, everybody's focused on their game, etc., etc., and then you look towards the end of the stay, towards the end of the summer, you see that some people, all it took was just 1 week and they have completely destroyed their routines. They are exhausted, they're playing bad, etc., etc. For some people, it's a month. For some people, it's 2 months. But many people, and I was one of those people, in the first year when I went for this marathon, huge like 3-month thing in Vegas, the first year, towards the end of the stay, I was completely burned out. My health suffered like properly. It was just horrible. I learned from that experience, luckily, and the next year I was very diligent about how to structure my days, how to get enough sleep, how to make sure that I eat well and I have proper rest time, I switch off enough, I have enough days off. But it's just so easy to get into this bad routine of not realizing that what you're doing is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not about this one session. It's not about this crazy fish who's not going to be there tomorrow, because chances are he's going to be there tomorrow. But by you playing 16-hour days, 7 days in a row, maybe you're not even profitable anymore at the table. Right. And for me, I remember like that first year when it happened to me specifically, I was crushing the games and I was running really good. So I was making a lot of money, and it felt like, oh, you just need to keep playing and just put in the long sessions. Well, after 3 months, when I decided, okay, this is going to be my last session, I still had 3 or 4 days left in Vegas. And I thought, well, I'm just going to relax for 4 days. I'm going to go see some shows, enjoy some dinner. I ended up on the couch in the house that I was renting, on the couch for 4 days, just watching TV, because I couldn't even think about going out. I had zero energy. And it happens so often to people.
Wow. 3 months in Vegas, pretty sick.
Yeah. I used to do do a thing like that quite often because for a large period of my career, I want to say I focused on the live games mostly, right? I would play the highest stakes that I could get into throughout the year, basically traveling like 5-6 months a year for games. And online for me was more of a training ground, right? So I spent a long time just playing 500 Zoom online, just because it's so easy to put in the volume. And if you treat it as a training, if you treat it as a testing ground for, improving your game, Zoom is great, right? And so that's what I was doing for quite a long stretch of my career.
Yeah, so the problem that you highlighted here is that treating poker as performance activity. I think it's very important. In poker, the good thing about the poker is that we know which people are the best in general, and we can invite them to podcasts, as I mentioned, podcasts with this Alex Foxen guy, or top cash game players like Sauce or guys like that. And we can learn from them, and we can already see how much stress do they put to increasing their performance by sleeping well, by eating well, by taking care about their health in general. I also worked a lot with professional traders, and trust me, traders have no idea about that. When I talk about this, they're like, what? So if I sleep better, eat better, it will have impact on my trading?
Because they
really?
probably thought it's just the quality of the Coke that they're consuming is what sets them apart. Right?
It's just, they cannot believe it. And because in trading, results are not public. So it's very hard to know which people are the best. So there are not podcasts with the best traders and so on. It's very, very few things like this. And because of that, they don't know how to learn the good practices. So that's completely different story. But I think it's very important to realize that poker is a performance activity. So it requires on our performance. So we can think about increasing our performance and structuring and organizing the day the way that during the session or during other activities that are very important for us, our performance would be the highest. By having very good sleep, this is the most important thing. Sleep is by far more important than anything. And then, of course, by having healthy lifestyle, fresh air, sport, diet, supplements, and so on. But sleep is, by far the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with that. That's obviously the case. And how easy it is to, and everybody was there, I think, at one point in a poker career where, the sleep is secondary to there's the fish available. But hey, you know what? If you're there only for one day, if one day is all you have, sure. But if you're planning to actually play the whole year, again, price to pay.
Yeah, exactly. I have also similar experience to you when it comes to live festivals. So first, couple festivals that I came, I was also grinding a lot, not putting a lot of stress to the sleep and recovery, and I felt very bad at the end. I felt totally burned out, without energy, and then I had to sleep for 1 week to fully recover. Now I have completely different approach, and I take care much more about the sleep, health, good food, supplements, and so on. And of course, it's much easier in some places than the others. And I think it's definitely tougher in Vegas than in Europe. The cuisine in US, there's just much more fat in all these things, but you still can manage through that. And there are also I heard about some healthy meal delivery services for poker players in Vegas. There are for sure enough good restaurants. So you can, it's harder than in Europe, but still, if you are, smart enough, prepared enough, you can deal with that.
And one thing you said about it's harder in Vegas, I want to talk about it a bit from another perspective, right? Because of course, the things you've mentioned about the quality of the food, etc., it's a challenge, right? It's a bit harder because it's less readily available, but it's all available there. And like you've mentioned, there's the food delivery services. There's plenty of incredible restaurants, a taxi drive away, or if you have a car, then just a short drive away. So it's not really a problem. It's just the decision you have to make of, okay, I'm skipping the crappy food that they have here at the offering. I'm just going to go have it somewhere else, right? But another aspect about Vegas is most people don't go, especially from Europe, they don't go just for 1 week. You would go for a longer time, right? So you're facing the challenges of you have to stay disciplined, you have to have your routines, etc., but you also there with other people. Most people who go to Vegas, they rarely go alone. They know at least somebody else, right? So you end up hanging out with these people. And it's pretty hard to stay disciplined and focused and true professional in a group of people who are anything but, right? So in many ways, the problem of Vegas is that the group pressure of making the bad decisions in terms of, going for a party after your session or stuff like that, this is what hurts a lot of people. Like in my own experience, I found a group of people that I really like, good friends of mine, that we usually rent the house together when we go to Vegas. And our house is a pretty weird house for poker players because basically we're home early. We start our session super early. We're home early. We might have a dinner together. We would go to a restaurant or something. There's not much alcohol, maybe like, a glass of wine. Well, a bottle of wine occasionally. That's about it. If you compare it to many other poker player houses in Vegas during summer, we are like the grandpas of poker, like really low key. But the reality is all of us hugely motivated to perform, not just on a 1 day basis, but for the whole trip. You're there for a month, you're there for 2 months. Well, you are thinking about how am I going to perform for these 2 months? How am I going to be able to, have proper routine that helps me actually achieve things?
Yeah, just wanted to add that I think it's super important. In general, your environment and the people who are surrounding you. It's I remember that I think in 2013 or 14, like 6-7 years ago, I used to be in like a, let's say, mid-stakes PLO study group, and the people there would only post like biggest hands of the session, mostly like bad beats or big bluffs, mostly like being happy about the good session or complaining about the variance, nothing really very, very useful. So in this kind of environment, your mindset is focused like just on the result, just on the bad beat, just on the variance. And it's very easy to really like switch into that thinking and making your mental game like similar to that. So it's very important to surround yourself with people at the mental game level that you would like to be. Okay, as you said, for example, people very performance oriented. That would be like one example, or people with very similar goals, similar attitude to life, to poker, to you.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's true for live poker. It's true for online poker. It's true in life in general. I mean, you eventually, become who you hang out with, right? Your friends influence in many ways the way that your life is shaped. And I actually had this conversation recently with Ben CB, and I think with Jane Anders as well. We touched upon it's like at some points in your life you have to sort of rearrange the people you hang out with, right? Because some relationships are just not productive, and we're lucky when we always have the same group of people around us and we all grow together. But people change, and you have to make these decisions. And in poker, especially when we talk about the life trips or or the study groups, etc., etc., it's important to be objective of whether you help each other really in pushing yourself to a good direction, right? Because, for example, the Ben CB story was that he's working with Stefan and Feder, and look where they got, right? The whole group. And it's not a coincidence, right? When you're pushing each other, when you're really motivating each other, and that's a beautiful thing to strive for. Because the problem with, well, it's not a problem, but the thing with poker is a lot of people see it as purely individualistic sport. It's just you, okay, maybe your coach, maybe, that's it, but not really. I mean, the people around you are hugely important. Even if you don't talk strategy necessarily, just seeing the examples of how other people approach the profession, how other people approach the whole thing, it's hugely beneficial and really, really important.
Yeah, that was a mistake that I was making for like first 7 years of my career. I realized maybe at like late 2017 or something that poker is so much about it's not like a team sport, but sometimes almost like a team sport, and it's so important, like the people around you, like the mutual cooperation and so on. Yeah, so totally agree.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about discipline, right? You said that you want to talk about discipline, so go ahead. Start with discipline. It's such a great topic to talk about.
Yeah, I think I once heard a very good metaphor that applies to discipline, that discipline is like electricity. So you can have the best equipment in your house, like TV, refrigerator, PC, but without electricity, nothing of that will work. And the same is, I think, with discipline. So you can have the best ideas, the best resources, the best books. You can buy yourself the best like training equipment or anything, but without discipline, it all just will not work. So I think it's so important to focus sometimes on how to be more disciplined as a person. Like, honestly, I think that also chapter about the discipline in my book is like the most valuable. And to me, if I would like pick like the best chapter of the book, I would pick this one. I feel like really strong in this topic. Of course, we can talk a lot about this, but one concept that I would like to bring here and leave for the viewers is that according to the most up-to-date like scientific research, discipline works very similar to a muscle. So muscle can get exhausted, can get tired. And the same is like discipline. If we push ourselves too hard, if we have too much discipline, we will get exhausted and tired, and we will not have like enough energy. But also muscles can get stronger. So also we can increase our level of discipline. For example, there has been a lot of studies where there was like a group of chain smokers. And one of the smokers, one of the group will like do just nothing. And the second group will have to be involved in some sort of activity that requires discipline, like every day, 15 minutes of some sort of physical exercises. And let's say after 1 month, if we compared all the two groups, the group that performed this 15-minute exercises every day performed much better in clinical tests of discipline, and a couple of them, not all of them, but a couple of them like quit smoking. Also, there was like another study where a group of people, and that's like very interesting study, where a group of people were involved in like monthly exercise program, but it was actually quite hard program that required quite a lot of discipline. And what happened is that after 1 month, the researchers found out that these people not only were more fit, but they started eating more healthy, they started reading more books, they started sleeping better, they started saving more money. So they started to implementing a lot of other habits related with discipline. And this leads us to believe that discipline can be strengthened. And if you are if you are getting more discipline, then you have your muscle of discipline is just stronger. And you need to learn how to use your muscle of discipline. And actually, I'm really like to do that. So, for example, for me, physical exercises to plan the whole training and to execute that is quite demanding activity. So what I do is I hire a personal trainer who will do that for me. He will plan the whole training for me. He will keep an eye on me and everything. And so that I don't have to use my resources of discipline during the training, and I can keep my discipline for the session where I will need it the most. Also, because I have this meal delivery system, I don't have to use my discipline for being disciplined about the shopping, about the cooking, washing dishes and everything. And I don't have to really focus on that. For example, there was also a research at one hospital that showed that medical staff is washing their hands less and less often throughout the day. So let's say during first couple of hours, they wash hands enough frequently, as they should. But as the day comes to an end, they are washing less and less frequently. And this results in their hands not being clean enough at the end of their shift. So what this hospital did is they put some stickers, reminders next to sinks, reminding them about the proper rules of washing hands. And this way they kind of outsource the discipline from their minds. They don't have to think more about this, but they have a sticker that is reminding them about the washing hands, and their frequency became normal, the way that it should be. And we can use a lot of small tricks like this to be more disciplined and to preserve our resources of discipline and to keep it during the session. And this is also very important during the downswing. Downswing is a period of time that is the most exhausting for our discipline, because downswing it's really tough. So during the downswing, our discipline muscle is the most vulnerable. So when some people say during a tough time that you need to take some break, actually they may be right in a sense that, because usually break doesn't change that much, but actually sometimes it can be a good solution, because your discipline muscle can be so exhausted that you need to recharge your discipline muscle by having a couple of days break. Not exactly in terms of your physical state, but exactly your discipline muscle. And the same is what professional, let's say, soccer players say. Very often that they want to have 1 or 2 weeks break, not exactly due to physical aspects, because some soccer players, they can be even playing more matches than they are playing, but they need a break from this training program, from this constant pressure and constant discipline that they have to wake up at specific hours, eat at specific hours, train at specific hours, sleep, going for massage, and everything is planned, from the morning to the evening. So it takes a lot of a lot of energy, and they need sometimes break, from that mental effort that they have to put every day. And I think that's something that could be applied in poker in many, many different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially what you said about the downswing. It's so true with the discipline or the willpower or whatever we're going to call it. But, you get that muscle tired, as you said, and it's not something that manifests itself visibly. You might not realize that that's happening, but it's happening, and because for a lot of people during the downswing, especially, it's so easy to see when their resilience sort of is getting lower and lower, right? When it just takes one trigger to put them on. Like, first it starts for some people who are strong with their mental game, but at some point they reach a point where they would be like, this is bullshit, like another flip and I lost another flip, and that's how somehow hurts them, right? The first 10 flips didn't hurt them, that 11th starts hurting, because that muscle of staying true to the process and not caring about the results, it already was involved like 10 times before, and then 11th time sort of puts you in a position where you're exhausted, and it's definitely a time to quit, right? And I know that
this is probably what happened with Phil Galfond in the Galfond challenge. He was like handling this downswing very, very well, and it's like 9 session, 10 session, 11 session, and at some point, okay, it's enough. His muscle was so exhausted by handling this streak of losses that he said, okay, it's enough.
Absolutely.
I need a break.
And it's a good point. That it's great that you brought up Phil Galfond, right? Because we're talking about these things and all the discipline and motivation, etc., etc. And I want people to understand that we still face the same problems ourselves as well. It's just we are able to handle them in a very efficient manner, right? So they don't become a problem. Because like I know from myself, like this example of, when I mentioned the 10 flips and then you get the 11th, it happened to me recently. I had a pretty bad run, probably last week. Yeah. So it was a pretty horrible session. And one of the sessions where there was a huge fish at the high stakes games. So I have to keep playing. I'm going to keep playing. And I was really good with handling everything, like all the crazy 2-outers and whatever happened. And then I catched myself in the moment when I realized, what? One flip hurt me emotionally. I was like, shit, why did I get upset? It's just a flip, right? I just lost a flip, not a big deal. We run it twice, I lose it twice. It's not a big deal. And I realized, okay, it's because it's the 11th. But the reality is, it doesn't matter if it's the first or the 100th or the 1000th. Right? It doesn't matter. It's just a flip. So what I had to do, or what I did, is I immediately sit out for one orbit. I get a glass of water, do some stretching. I'm back to the game. I'm totally fine. But my experience helped me do this because I was aware enough mid-game to realize, hey, this just happened. I was emotionally influenced by this flip. It shouldn't happen. This is bullshit. And I realized this is the moment when I need to take a break. For a lot of people who are not at that stage, they don't recognize that, okay, this is the time when I need this break. And that's where the problem arises, because, you go from slightly emotionally uncomfortable with that one extra lost flip to more emotionally uncomfortable to, in the end, on like complete rage and monkey tilt, right? So it's important not to allow yourself to get there. And it's, like you said, it's great that Phil recognized it. Maybe he recognized it too late. Maybe, we don't know. But it's interesting that this is all public, and we can see, everybody can see how things are happening and how these people are handling these swings.
Yeah, exactly.
Because also, one funny thing to me is that how many people just basically focus, and we already talked about it, but so many people focus on, Phil is just bad, Phil is bad, etc., etc. The reality is everybody gonna have bad stretches. And I'm not even getting into discussion of who's a better player, who has an edge. That's not important. Even if we would assume that they are, breaking even against each other, which they're probably not, but even if we would assume, still, swings are going to happen. You're going to be losing. How you're going to handle it is part of the game. It's part of what makes you a strong player. Phil got to where he is because he was strong mentally throughout, right? And I know Vinny personally, I know that he had some really sick swings in his life as well. So I'm sure that if he was on the receiving end of the bad swing, he would handle it very good as well.
Yeah, this like handling tough situations is definitely like one of the toughest and one of the most important things in the poker career, but also the thing that can give you so much strength and so much confidence. I've spoken with so many players who suffered like a huge downswings in the past. And what they very often say is after that is that they say that, okay, I went through the downswing and I know that nothing will break me. I know that I'm much more confident. I'm much more stronger now because I already know that even if something like this will happen in the future, I know that I can deal with that. And that's like a huge thing. If you can have like this deep belief in yourself that even though this downswing can come, you will still manage to deal with that. So that's something, that's and like for people, like the biggest wins are like tournament wins or like big cash games wins. But to be honest, throughout our whole career, the biggest wins will be the wins that we win with our weaknesses and we win with our like the toughest times. And even though it's hard, we still like go through it and we come back stronger than before. That's actually like the biggest wins that we can
especially on a personal level. Like these experiences, mold you. Hopefully, if you come out on top in these experiences, if you learn from them, then they mold you into a stronger, more capable person, whatever you pursue. For people who start pursuing career outside poker, eventually this whole experience really is useful in many, many fields out there, right? Listen, Leszek, how about, so can people still buy your book?
Yeah, it's available through Runchuks and on Amazon, and it will be soon, or it is already, I'm not sure, available as ebook, because like the couple of people messaged me that delivery outside the US it's almost the price of the book. So very soon we'll have ebook, or it's the problem with Runchuks is that they have this like big project of Runchuks Poker, which of course is more important for them than a book. And because of that, some things that they go a bit slower than they should. But I think from what I know from also Rio Manager is that now they will more focus on like some other projects, including books. So I think that they'll push it, and this
all right,
should
sounds
be
good. So
soon.
yeah, I'll drop the link in the description to your book so that people can easily find it. Your website, right? Where else can people find you actually? Where are you present?
Yeah, I'm having my website, but I'm not offering like now any coachings or anything like that. I'm also like available on social media, Facebook and Instagram, but I'm not really that active since like, I don't know, for last half a year. As I told you before, right now I'm focused more on the poker, and I find like social media activity sometimes a bit like it's just taking a lot of my time. But these are the places that people can find me.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely put all the links to your stuff and your social media down there. And I totally can relate to you feeling that the social media presence is a bit too much sometimes, because again, it takes so much time. And in the end, if you try to focus on poker primarily, any time that you put elsewhere, again, every decision has a price. It's a recurring theme here. All right, cool.